Have you ever felt like maybe God's happiness and your happiness are kind of in conflict? Today, we're jumping into a concept called Christian hedonism, and the big idea here is that they're not in conflict at all. They're actually the very same thing. What's really interesting, though, is that one of history's most brilliant theologians, a key thinker behind this idea, once found it completely repulsive.
And that theologian was Jonathan Edwards. Back in the 1700s, he was really wrestling with this idea of God's absolute sovereignty, this notion that God is in complete control of everything that happens. And as you can see from his own words, his initial reaction wasn't just disagreement. He thought it was a horrible doctrine.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, right? It raises a huge question. If God's number one goal in everything he does is to bring glory to himself, well, how can that possibly be loving towards us? It sounds like those two things are on a collision course. So let's unpack that.
To even begin to answer that question, we have to start with a bedrock idea: God's total and complete authority over everything. You'll hear theologians call this his sovereignty. So what does it actually mean for God to be sovereign? Well, Psalm 115:3 puts it about as clearly as you can. Our God is in the heavens, he does all that he pleases. Basically, it means God has the absolute right and the infinite power to bring about all of his purposes. Nothing and no one can ever stop him.
Now, let's just follow the logic here for a second. If God is completely sovereign, it means his plans can never, ever be frustrated. And if your plans can never be frustrated, what does that make you? It makes you the happiest being in existence. A God whose will is constantly thwarted would be a miserable God. But a sovereign God is a happy God, and here's the kicker. His happiness is the source of ours.
Okay, but hold on. That brings up a really difficult point. If God is so unshakably happy, how do we square that with all the evil and suffering we see in the world? That's a tough one.
The biblical answer is that God's sovereign plan actually includes everything, even the awful stuff, like natural disasters, and yes, even human sin. Nothing happens outside of his control. Just think about Joseph and his brothers. What they did was pure evil, selling him into slavery. But years later, what did Joseph say? He said, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." God used their sin to accomplish his good purpose.
To help make sense of this, Jonathan Edwards proposed that God sees things through two different lenses. You could call one a narrow lens, which is his will of command, and the other a wide-angle lens, which is his will of decree. It's the difference between seeing a single event up close and seeing the whole big picture.
So through that narrow lens, that close-up view, God sees sin for what it is, in and of itself, an ugly rebellion against his goodness. And he hates it. It grieves him. The suffering of people is abhorrent to him. He doesn't take pleasure in wickedness.
But then you get the wide-angle view. And there's no more staggering example of this than the cross. Isaiah 53 gives us this shocking statement. It was the will of the Lord to crush him. In itself, the crucifixion of God's Son was the most evil act in human history. But seen through that wide-angle lens, it accomplished the most glorious good imaginable, our salvation.
That wide-angle view lets God see the entire beautiful mosaic of salvation history. Now, that mosaic has some dark tiles in it for sure. Sin, pain, suffering. But when he sees the finished masterpiece, the final picture that perfectly accomplishes his glorious plan, that fills him with delight.
So that leads to the next question. What exactly is it about this finished picture that brings God so much joy? What is he delighting in?
And the answer is himself. Most of us have heard the catechism answer for man. Our chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Well, guess what? It's the same for God. The chief end of God is to glorify God and enjoy himself forever. His ultimate happiness is found in the display of his own glory.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds incredibly vain, right? But it's actually the opposite. Think it through. It is always right to treasure what is most valuable. Well, what's the most valuable thing in the universe? God's own glory. So for God not to value his own glory above everything else would actually be unrighteous. It's not vanity. It's a matter of divine righteousness. He has to love himself most. Okay, so we've got a God who is sovereign, happy, and prizes his own glory above all else. What in the world does that have to do with us? This is where an incredible insight from C.S. Lewis really helps put the pieces together. C.S. Lewis had this light bulb moment. He realized that our enjoyment of something isn't really complete until we express it in praise. He put it this way,
Quote, "The praise not merely expresses but completes the enjoyment. It is its appointed consummation. It's the final step."
And you know this is true in your own life, right? When you see an incredible sunset, what's your first impulse? You grab the person next to you and say, wow, look at that. When you hear a great song, you want to share it. That act of praising, of sharing your delight, doesn't just express your joy, it actually makes it fuller. Your joy is incomplete until it overflows.
And this completely reframes why God commands us to praise him. It's not because he's an insecure egomaniac who needs our approval. No way. It's because he loves us and wants our joy to be full. And since our joy is only made full when we praise what we enjoy most, his command to praise him is actually an invitation into the greatest happiness we can possibly experience.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now and see how this solves that initial problem we started with.
And here it is, the resolution to the whole thing. God is most for us when he is most for himself. That conflict we felt between God's glory and our good, it just evaporates. They aren't two competing goals. His pursuit of his own glory is his pursuit of our good. I mean, think about it. What is the single most loving thing God could possibly do for you? It would be to give you the greatest, most lasting, most satisfying treasure in the universe to enjoy. And what is that treasure? It's himself. By pursuing his glory and putting it on display for us to enjoy, he is loving us in the highest and best way possible. John Piper puts a fine point on it. He says, God's pursuit of praise from us and our pursuit of pleasure in him are the same pursuit. Do you see it? When we find our deepest satisfaction in him, he receives the greatest glory from us. It's one and the same goal.
So let me leave you with this. That doctrine that once seemed so horrible to Jonathan Edwards, a God who does absolutely everything for his own glory, turns out to be the best news we could ever hear. So what if you started to live as if that were true? What if God's pursuit of his glory and your pursuit of your joy are really the exact same thing?